I am Evelyn, 34 years old, and for the longest time I believed that if I just worked hard enough and proved myself, my family would finally see my worth. All those years of striving, of swallowing, disappointment, of hoping for a simple "we're proud of you," they shaped me as surely as the city blocks outside my window. Until recently, my life looked modest from the outside, a rented apartment in Manhattan, working long hours, saving every dollar with a dream of someday having a place to truly call my own. But beneath that quiet routine lay something else, a hidden strength, the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rewrite the ending of my story. I was about to close on a penthouse apartment, a place I never imagined I could afford, the symbol of everything I had sacrificed for. If only I'd known as I sent out invitations for my housewarming party that the people I loved most would be the ones to test me in ways I could never have prepared for. My family always had a certain pecking order, as most do, but in ours it was set in stone. My younger sister Isabel was the golden child. She was 3 years younger than me, with honey blonde hair and an easy laugh that made her the darling of every family gathering. Isabel won spelling bees, brought home trophies from swim meets, and seemed to shine a little brighter no matter what room she entered. Whenever she came home with an award, my parents would beam with pride. "That's our girl, let's go out for ice cream to celebrate." When I came home with "straight," as the response was more reserved. "That's what we expect from you, Evelyn. You're the responsible one." It wasn't unkind, not exactly, but it was as if love and approval were a finite resource, and I was always just a little bit short. Looking back, I can see the pattern as clear as day, but when you're young, you think maybe next time things will be different. I remember my 10th birthday, most of all a date that still stings even now. My mother promised I could have a party, a real one with cake and balloons and all my friends from school. That morning she came into my room, her face already clouded with apology. "There's been a change of plans, sweetheart. Isabel has her championship swim meet today, and your father and I can't miss it. We'll reschedule your party, I promise." We never did. That day ended with me watching from the bleachers, singing "Happy Birthday" quietly to myself as my sister stood on the podium. There was no cake, no presents, just a lesson that Isabel's victories always came first. Years passed and the examples piled up. In high school, I worked a part-time job all summer to save for a new laptop I desperately needed for class. I found my savings envelope empty one night, with only a note from my father borrowing this for a few weeks. "Isabel's car needs repairs. We'll pay you back soon." They never did, and I learned to stop asking. Even in college, when it came time for tuition, my parents offered to cover Isabel's entire cost, opening what they called the family account for her expenses. I, on the other hand, was told that scholarships were available for people who worked hard. "You'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself," my mother said, not unkindly. I worked 2 jobs, took out loans, and when I graduated, no one asked if I wanted a celebration. Despite it all, I found ways to help when they needed it. When my father had surgery and insurance didn't cover all the bills, I quietly paid the hospital the outstanding balance, $28,000, signing the check with my middle name so no one would suspect. When Isabel faced a shortfall on her down payment for a condo in Brooklyn, I funneled $25,000 through an old account I knew she still had access to. They never knew the source. They thanked an anonymous angel, and I let them have that comfort. For years, I told myself that maybe this was what family was: quiet service, keeping the peace, accepting your place. But as my own dreams grew clearer, so did my understanding of how much I had given away piece by piece, hoping for scraps of gratitude that never quite came. Still, when the time came to buy my own apartment, I couldn't help but hope that this finally would be the moment they saw me, the moment things turned around. What I didn't realize was that, beneath the surface, something darker was building. Invitations sent, champagne, chilled keys nearly in hand. I was ready for a new chapter. I had no idea that one night would destroy everything I thought I knew about loyalty. The night of my housewarming party, the city seemed to hum with possibility. The air was crisp, and Manhattan's lights flickered against the windows of my soon-to-be home as if welcoming me to a new life. I arrived early, setting out glasses and trays of hors d'oeuvres, smoothing the fresh linens on my new sofa, every detail meticulously chosen, paid for with every sacrifice and extra hour I had worked these past years. Guests began to arrive one by one. Friends from work who had seen me through lean times, neighbors from my old building, even a few colleagues who came out of pure curiosity about this big milestone I had reached. But it was my family's arrival that sent my heart skittering in my chest. My mother walked in first, her hair perfectly done, eyes scanning the space with a practiced air of appraisal. My father followed, hands in his pockets, his gaze lingering on the city view as if calculating its worth. Isabel came last in a dress that sparkled under the chandelier. She flashed a bright, rehearsed smile and handed me a bottle of wine, barely glancing at the gift table. For a moment, everything seemed almost normal. There was laughter, toasts, and the polite chatter of people who only half know each other. I circulated the room, making sure everyone was comfortable. My parents gravitated toward the balcony, whispering in a way that made me uneasy. Isabel posed for photos, careful to capture only her good side. As the night wore on, a small knot of anxiety settled in my stomach. I brushed it off, focusing on the joy I felt, finally a space of my own, a life that was truly mine. The escrow account for the apartment was set to close in a matter of days, the final transfer nearly $800,000 already sitting in a secure holding. I had checked the balance twice that morning, almost unable to believe that every penny was real. But sometime after 10 o'clock, just as I was showing an old college friend the kitchen's hidden pantry, my phone buzzed with a sharp, urgent alert. Unusual withdrawal, urgent action required. At first, I thought it was a routine security notification. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite name. When I opened the banking app, the world seemed to tilt. The escrow account, the one I had spent years building, every bonus, every saved dollar, was empty. The full sum, almost $800,000, was gone. Transferred just minutes before, flagged as authorized by power of attorney. My hands shook as I scrolled through the details. Every line was legal, every code precise. But I had never signed away my rights. I barely noticed as voices grew louder from the living room. I stumbled back, pale and shaking. Isabel caught sight of me and frowned. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." My words came out choked, desperate. "The money, it's gone. The escrow account. Someone took everything." For a moment, there was silence. My mother set down her champagne with a careful clink. My father crossed his arms and Isabel's eyes darted to the side, avoiding mine. Then, in a voice that cut through the noise, my father spoke loud enough for a few guests to overhear. "Family needs come first, Evelyn. We did what had to be done. You should be grateful we even let you get this far." The room went quiet as faces turned to us. Someone pulled out a phone. A few guests murmured uncomfortably, not sure whether to step in or slip away. My cheeks burned as the reality of it sank in. This wasn't just a private humiliation, it was a public one. My mother's words were no softer. "This apartment isn't really yours, darling. You're not the only one who sacrificed." Isabel looked at me with a coldness I'd never seen before. "You should have known better than to keep that kind of money a secret from your own family." Somewhere behind me, a group chat pinged on a guest's phone. A voice message played, my father's words leaking into the digital ether. "She can survive a little setback. That money always belonged to the family anyway." By morning, I would discover that message had been forwarded, screenshot, and sent to dozens of people, colleagues, friends, even the building's residents group. As I stood there, trembling in front of everyone I cared about, the betrayal became complete. The home I had dreamed of was slipping through my fingers, not because of strangers or mistakes, but because the people I'd tried so hard to please believed I owed them everything. I watched as my guests averted their eyes, some with pity, some with discomfort, a few with open curiosity, waiting to see what I would do next. That night, I lost not just my savings, but the last fragile hope that my family would ever change. What I didn't yet realize was that in losing them, I might finally find myself. It's funny what you remember in moments of shock. I remember the taste of cold champagne gone flat in my mouth, the way the marble floor felt too solid under my shaking legs. After my family's words, so casual, so final, echoed through the stunned crowd, the party died all at once. A few friends tried to comfort me, but most left in quiet discomfort, their whispers trailing down the hallway. The apartment, which had felt so full of promise only hours before, now echoed with emptiness. I collapsed onto the sofa, phone clutched tightly, scrolling through the transaction again and again, as if sheer willpower could make the numbers return. Each time the reality was the same, my entire future had vanished with a few taps on a screen. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I combed through every email, every banking notification, searching for some mistake. The transfer had gone through at 10:15 p.m. Authorized using a power of attorney I had never signed. Legal on paper, yes. Moral, just, or forgivable. Not in any universe I recognized. By sunrise, panic gave way to fury. I called the bank, voice trembling as I explained the situation. I need to dispute a transfer. Someone has used my money without my permission. The bank's representative was polite but immovable. The paperwork was in order, Miss Ross. We have a notarized power of attorney on file. The request came from your immediate family. I hung up, hands clammy with disbelief. I turned next to my parents, leaving messages they would never return. Isabel, for her part, replied only with a single ice-cold text. This is what happens when you think you're better than the rest of us. Consider it a lesson. It was only then that the full weight of public humiliation set in. Someone had posted a snippet of my father's voice message to social media, his words about family and money spreading like wildfire. Within hours, former colleagues, acquaintances, even my building's doorman sent awkward texts of support or worse, requests for the full story. I wanted to disappear, but I also wanted answers. Determined to fight, I contacted a lawyer, a recommendation from a colleague who had once faced a messy family trust dispute. Lucas Bennett was younger than I expected, sharp-eyed and direct. He listened to my story in silence, then asked, "Do you have any proof that this wasn't your authorization? Any idea how they accessed your paperwork or digital accounts?" It was a question I hadn't dared ask myself. I spent the next 2 days combing through every record looking for cracks. My father had once asked for copies of my ID for tax purposes. My mother had always been the keeper of family paperwork, trusted without question. There were email trails, cloud files. I'd never shared tiny clues that in hindsight spelled out a careful manipulation. Lucas requested my apartment's security footage. On the night of the party, there was a brief window, a shadow at my home office desk, a figure with my laptop. It was Isabel, caught on camera, quickly copying something from my desk drawer, face set in grim determination. Armed with this, Lucas filed an emergency motion with the court seeking to freeze the funds and launch a formal investigation into fraud. I felt a flicker of hope, but also dread. What if it all came to nothing? What if my family's word, their signatures, their story outweighed my evidence? While the legal wheels turned, I found myself alone for the first time in years. Most of my so-called friends fell silent, wary of taking sides. But a few old friends, work allies, and my neighbor Clara drew closer, bringing groceries, kind words, and practical advice. "You're not the first person to be betrayed by family," Clara said gently one afternoon. "But you might be one of the few with the courage to fight back." I tried to remember that. Each sleepless night, each lawyer's meeting, each cold glance from neighbors who'd seen my family's humiliation on the building's group chat, these became fuel for something new inside me. A stubborn will to see this through. One day Lucas called with news. "We have enough to file a formal complaint. The judge has agreed to subpoena the account records. They'll have to answer Evelyn. And we've got that security footage as leverage." It wasn't the end, but it was a start. My parents sent a single chilling email. "We suggest you drop this for the family's sake. There's no need to air private matters in public. After all, you have your career, you'll recover." Isabel, as ever, was even crueler. "No one cares, Ev. Get over yourself." That was the night I finally let go, not just of the money, but of the illusion that my family would ever protect me. But something inside me had shifted. The loss was real, but so was the resolve it left behind. If I couldn't reclaim what was stolen, I could still reclaim my voice, my dignity, and perhaps my future. I was ready to fight, even if it meant standing alone. In the days that followed, life slowed to a strange crawl. I would wake before dawn, the silence of my half-furnished apartment pressing and making each tick of the clock sound louder. The news of my family's betrayal had spread further than I'd imagined possible. The story became a cautionary whisper among neighbors, a viral thread online, and a lesson relayed in hushed voices at work. I kept my head down, shopping for groceries late at night, answering only the most necessary messages. Shame and anger lived side by side within me. Shame for having trusted so blindly, and anger for how thoroughly I had been used. In moments of weakness, I replayed my father's voice from that night. "Family needs come first. You should be grateful we even let you get this far." It was a wound that seemed to deepen with every replay. Most of my friends faded into the background. A few, those I had thought closest, stopped calling altogether. Some, I realized, had only been drawn to me by the shine of my new success. But there were others, a handful, who refused to let me drown. My neighbor Clara, steadfast as ever, left home-cooked meals outside my door. My old college roommate Rachel drove in from Boston just to sit with me in the quiet, offering gentle conversation and a sense of continuity with a life before betrayal. And then there was Lucas, my attorney, who became more than a legal ally. He was a sounding board for my frustrations and a guide through the labyrinth of legal filings and hearings. "You're not fighting for the money," he reminded me during one sleepless night. "You're fighting for the principle, for your right to exist beyond what your family tried to define you as." It was a truth I clung to even as the legal process ground forward with agonizing slowness. As we built the case, a new source of humiliation emerged. The incident had become a trending topic on a popular financial advice forum, with anonymous users dissecting every leaked message and security clip. Someone had uploaded a snippet of the lobby footage, Isabel slipping into my office, leaving with something hidden in her bag. For a time, I wanted to hide from it all. But Clara, ever practical, sat me down one morning with a mug of strong coffee. "You can let this shame define you, or you can turn it inside out," she said, voice steady. "Let people see what happened. Show them what standing up looks like." That afternoon, with trembling hands, I wrote a post of my own. I shared my story not as a victim, but as someone reclaiming their voice. I detailed the years of quiet support, the countless sacrifices, the night my dreams were snatched away in full view of those who claimed to love me. I ended with a simple question. What do you do when the people who should protect you are the very ones who cause your deepest wounds? The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers, some angry on my behalf, others sharing stories of their own. I heard from people who had lost savings, homes, and dignity to family schemes. Some offered practical advice. A few offered leads to media outlets or advocacy groups for victims of financial abuse. One message from a woman named Brenda in Seattle stood out. "You may have lost your family, but you're finding a new one right here." With Lucas's guidance, we pushed the legal case further. The bank, under pressure from public scrutiny, reopened their review of the transfer. We subpoenaed digital records and notary logs, uncovering a web of small deceptions, emails, forged phone calls placed from my parents' number pretending to be me. As the evidence mounted, my parents' tone shifted from arrogance to desperation. My mother left a voicemail, her voice trembling, her words half apology, half threat. "Evelyn, you're tearing the family apart. If you let this go, maybe we can work something out. Think about what you're doing." But for the first time, I didn't waver. I had spent too many years swallowing my own needs. Now, with a growing network of supporters, a mountain of evidence, and my own sense of self finally awakening, I was determined to see this through. I wasn't just fighting for my lost savings anymore. I was fighting for my name, my story, my right to a future untethered from guilt and manipulation. As the legal showdown drew closer, my parents tried to offer settlements, small amounts meant to quiet me. I refused every time. I didn't want a fraction of what was mine. I wanted accountability. I wanted to prove that sometimes justice is louder than shame. For the first time since the party, I looked out over the city from my window and felt something like hope. This wasn't the ending I had dreamed of. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of something even better. When the court date finally arrived, the city was locked in the golden hush of late autumn. I dressed carefully, choosing a dark blue suit that once belonged to my grandmother, a small armor of memory and dignity. The courthouse was just a few subway stops away, but each step through those wide marble halls felt like crossing the threshold into a different life. Lucas met me at the entrance, his presence steady and quiet. The world outside had grown louder as the story spread. There were reporters lingering on the courthouse steps, and a few faces I recognized from my building, curious to see how my family drama would end. I kept my head high, though. Inside, every part of me trembled. Inside the courtroom, my parents sat side by side, stone-faced and silent. Isabel, in a crisp white blouse, avoided my gaze, her mouth set in a hard line. I wondered for a fleeting moment what it must feel like to risk everything for a sense of entitlement. They looked smaller than I remembered, somehow diminished by their own choices. The hearing began with formalities, but soon moved to the heart of the matter: the fraudulent power of attorney, the unauthorized withdrawal, and the cascade of evidence Lucas and I had gathered. The judge, a woman with a sharp eye and a reputation for fairness, listened intently. Lucas was methodical, laying out the timeline: the months of careful saving, the housewarming night, the stolen digital documents, the banking records, and surveillance clips. He played the security footage for the room. The screen showed Isabel slipping into my office, copying documents, her face tense and determined. There was no sound, but the meaning was clear. Then came the voice message, my father's words broadcast for the record. She can survive a little setback. That money always belonged to the family anyway. I saw my mother's shoulders sag as it played. For the first time, doubt flickered across her features. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I described the years of silent support, hospital bills, paid debts, forgiven gifts, given in secret. I told the court about the party the moment I realized what had been taken and the shock of discovering just how far my family was willing to go. I'm not here just for the money, I said quietly. I'm here because trust once broken can ruin a person's whole sense of self. I want to prove that what they did was wrong, so maybe it won't happen to someone else. The defense tried to muddy the waters. My parents' lawyer argued that family finances are always complicated, that I had always helped, that surely I'd known about the transfer or even tacitly approved it. He suggested that my public sharing of the story was an attempt to shame my parents into giving me more than I deserved. But every time they tried to twist the facts, Lucas countered with hard evidence: forged emails, digital signatures traced to my parents' computer, security footage, witness statements from neighbors who had seen Isabel late that night, banking records showing the money had been immediately split between accounts in my father's and sister's names. Isabel broke first on the witness stand. Under questioning, her answers faltered. "We thought it was fair," she muttered, unable to meet my eyes. She always had more than she needed. She could start over. The family needed it. The courtroom was silent as her words echoed. Even my parents looked shaken. The judge's decision came a week later. I returned to court alone, my hands icy with nerves. When the judge read her ruling, I could hardly breathe. "The court finds clear and convincing evidence of fraud and financial abuse," she said. "The transfer of nearly $800,000 was obtained through deception and must be reversed in full. Furthermore, the defendants are ordered to pay punitive damages, an additional $250,000 for the breach of fiduciary duty and the emotional harm caused to Miss Ross." I wept quietly, almost soundlessly, right there in the wooden bench, feeling a release I hadn't dared hope for. The money mattered, of course, but the acknowledgement of what had been done, the public confirmation that I had not imagined my pain was worth more than all the bank balances in Manhattan. My parents refused to look at me as they left. Isabel paused at the door, her eyes wet with unshed tears. For a moment, I thought she might speak, but she turned away. Outside, the air felt cleaner. The reporters called my name, eager for a statement. I spoke simply. Sometimes justice comes not just from the law, but from refusing to let shame silence you. I hope anyone watching knows they're not alone. Within days, the news spread. My story appeared on talk shows, in newspaper columns, and all over social media. People reached out from across the country, some to offer support, some to share their own stories of betrayal. The humiliation of that party, once so sharp, now felt almost distant, a scar, but one that had healed into something stronger. With the funds returned, I finalized the purchase of my penthouse, but I did not return to old patterns. I hired an accountant, changed every password, built boundaries as high as the city's skyline. My phone filled with new messages, some from distant cousins or family friends, some from people I'd never met. A few even came from my parents, at first angry, then pleading, then simply silent when I did not answer. But the most surprising outcome was the community that found me: men and women who had lost homes, inheritances, peace of mind, to the greed or neediness of relatives. People who had, like me, been the dependable one, the forgiving one, until there was nothing left to give. We formed a small group, meeting online at first, then in person, sharing resources, legal contacts, and, above all, hope. Lucas and I grew close. He became a friend and, over time, something more. It was a slow, gentle process marked by mutual respect and a refusal to repeat the patterns of my family's past. And as for my family, they faded from my life. The punishment wasn't just legal or financial, it was the absence of my presence, my care, my forgiveness. For the first time, I let myself accept that I could mourn what I lost and still build something better. Standing on my new balcony, watching the city flicker beneath me, I realized I had done more than win a case. I had reclaimed my story. I had proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to let betrayal be the last word. 6 months passed in the blink of an eye. The dust from the courtroom drama settled, and winter's chill gave way to a gentle spring. The penthouse, once a battleground of memories and dreams deferred, now belonged wholly to me. I painted the walls, warm tones, replaced the cold, impersonal art with photographs from travels I had always postponed, and filled the space with plants. A small, persistent reminder that new life can take root even after a fire. In those first weeks of freedom, the mornings were the sweetest. I would rise before sunrise, brew strong coffee in my little kitchen, and stand at the window as light crept across the city skyline. There was a quiet that felt sacred, a peace I had not known since childhood, before ambition, before disappointment, before betrayal had carved its name into my bones. Each day I set new routines: a morning walk in Central Park, lunch with colleagues who had stood by me, evenings spent reading or volunteering at a community center for those facing housing insecurity. Perhaps the greatest gift was learning how to build a family from scratch. My chosen family, Clara, Rachel, Lucas, and a few other steadfast souls, became the core of my new life. We celebrated milestones together: birthdays, job promotions, simple Tuesday nights with home-cooked pasta and bad television. These moments, humble as they were, shone brighter than any holiday from my old life. The support group that grew out of my story flourished. At first, it was just a handful of us trading horror stories and advice over coffee. But word spread, and soon I found myself helping others draft legal documents, navigate the confusing world of banks and trusts, and most of all, simply survive the loneliness that follows a family betrayal. We hosted workshops, raised funds for those facing court battles, and every so often held small gatherings in my living room, sharing food and hard-won wisdom. I saw men in their 70s and women in their 20s alike. Betrayal has no age, but neither does resilience. My career too took on new life. Free from the constant anxiety of appeasing my family, I poured myself into my work. My company recognized my efforts with a promotion, and I was able to invest in a small side business helping others who, like me, had to start over late in life. Real estate, for all its risks, became a vehicle for new beginnings. I bought another apartment, this one for a friend escaping her own toxic family, with a loose agreement to pay me back when you can. The satisfaction of that act of choosing generosity for its own sake far surpassed any hollow recognition I had ever chased as a daughter or sister. As for my biological family, time was not kind. News of the court case and the viral social media posts made them pariahs in their own circles. My parents attempted now and then to reach out, first with apology, then with appeals to forgiveness, and finally with thinly veiled threats about destroying the family legacy. Isabel's fortunes faded, friends distanced themselves, and her job prospects shrank in the face of public scandal. There were moments when I felt a pang of guilt, a relic of the loyalty that once defined me. But those feelings, while real, no longer controlled me. I learned that closure is something you build for yourself. The world does not always grant us the apology we deserve. Sometimes the only justice is in living well and refusing to answer the door when the past comes knocking. Still, I left the door of compassion slightly ajar. If any of them had reached out with honest regret, I might have listened. But apologies shaped by desperation or public shame ring hollow, and I refused to sacrifice my new peace for the illusion of reconciliation. In the year that followed, I traveled. Paris in the spring, Florence in the fall. I stood in front of paintings I had only seen in books, wandered old streets alone, and found beauty in solitude. Each journey reminded me that the world is vast and belonging is something you can create wherever you dare to start again. One afternoon, returning home from the airport, I found a letter waiting for me in the lobby. It was from my father, a real letter handwritten in his old, careful script. The words were stiff, heavy with regret, yet unable to admit any true wrongdoing. He wrote, "We were only trying to protect what was ours. I hope one day you will understand." I did understand finally, but not in the way he intended. I understood that some people cling to what they know, control, power, the safety of old patterns, because change feels like loss. And I understood that it is not my job to heal the wounds they refuse to face. I shared that letter with my support group, and we talked for hours about forgiveness, not as something owed, but as a kindness you give yourself. Brenda from Seattle said it best. You can forgive without letting them back in. You can let go without forgetting. So that's what I did. I let go little by little. I built rituals around gratitude, journaling, hosting dinners, giving to charity. Every so often, I would catch myself smiling for no reason, marveling at the peace that had come after the storm. To those listening now, I ask, have you ever been betrayed by those closest to you? Did you find yourself starting over when you thought you'd already reached your limit? I hope you remember this. Your worth is not measured by the approval of those who could not see you. Family in the truest sense is chosen, built through kindness, loyalty, and the courage to walk away when love turns to harm. If my story resonates with you, I invite you to share your own. Let's remind each other that the last word is never betrayal, it's hope and the promise of a life reclaimed one day at a time.